section provides a brief introduction to receiver operating curves, a tool used to test the predictive accuracy of models. This brief presentation was organized by Dr. Lemmy and narrated by Samantha Tone. Procedures are used when a portion of a code must be repeatedly executed. A procedure is a subprogram or module that performs a particular data manipulation task. Procedures allow modular design of the SQL code. A subprogram can be called repeatedly within the code, thus reducing repeated code. Procedures are created with the create procedure statement. It is stored in the database and can be deleted with the drop procedure statement. Each procedure has a name and may also have a parameter list. It also has the following three parts: declarative, executable, and exceptions. The declarative part is an optional part. It contains declarations of types, cursors, constants, variables, exceptions, and nested subprograms. These types are local to the procedure and cease to exist when it completes execution. The executable part is a mandatory part and contains statements that perform the designated action. The exception handling part is an optional part. It contains the code that handles errors during runtime. A procedure is created or replaced with the create statement. The procedure name obviously specifies the name of the procedure. It must not be a reserved word and should not contain space. The optional parameter list contains name, mode, and types of the parameters. In represents the value that will be passed from outside when the procedure is called. It is a read-only parameter. Inside the subprogram, an in parameter acts like a constant. It cannot be assigned a value. You can pass a constant, literal, initialized variable, or expression as an in parameter. Out represents the parameter that will be used to return a value to the calling program. Inside the procedure, an out parameter acts like a variable. You can change its value and reference the value after assigning it. An in-out parameter type passes an initial value to a subprogram and returns an updated value to the caller. It can be assigned a value in the calling program, and the value can be updated in the procedure. Type refers to variable type, such as integer, float, variable, character, and so on. The AS keyword is used instead of the is keyword for creating a standalone procedure. Within a calling program, the execute command runs the standalone procedure. Procedure body contains the executable part. This is where the input variables are modified to produce the output variables. The last line of a procedure should be the end command. We demonstrate the use of procedure with one created to calculate likelihood ratio. In this procedure, we calculate the likelihood ratio associated with a specific diagnosis. The first line is commented out and is used only when we wish to drop the previous draft of the procedure from the database. This line gives the name of the procedure and the types of variables that are used as input in the procedure. Note that the name of these variables can be different from the names used to call the procedure, and the computer will set the calling variable set to the procedure variable set in the order listed. The 7-letter long variable called at dx contains the diagnosis code. The procedure will calculate the likelihood ratio associated with its diagnosis code. This section is the execution code. During this section, the computer calculates the likelihood ratio for the diagnosis code used to call the procedure. It reads the data from permanent table file in AgeDX database. For each unique person, it calculates if the patient has the diagnosis or does not. It also calculates if the patient is dead or alive. It puts these data in temporary file 1. Notice that repeated calls to the procedure does not require us to drop the temporary file as each call causes all temporary files to drop. Next, the likelihood ratio is calculated for patients who have the diagnosis. Separate calculations are done for situations where no one with the diagnosis is dead, where everyone with the diagnosis is dead, and where some of the patients with the diagnosis are dead and some are alive. To run a procedure, one must call it using the execute command. The syntax is the reserved word execute, followed by the procedure name, followed with procedure parameters separated by commas. This code calls the previously described likelihood ratio procedure. First, the various parameters are declared and calculated. Here, the diagnosis code is set and the total patients alive and dead are calculated from the data. The execute command tells the computer to run the procedure called likelihood ratio and to pass to this procedure 3 pieces of data. A constant containing the diagnosis code text and 2 other floating numbers containing the total number of patients alive or dead. The result of executing the procedure is the calculated likelihood ratio that can be passed back to the calling program or stored in a permanent file using the append command. One can repeatedly call and execute a procedure. This provides an important advantage to coding as it allows portions of the code to be reused. Procedures can streamline repeated code.